Good afternoon. We gather as an entire school body on or near November 11th every year to commemorate the sacrifices of countless men and women who have selflessly served this great nation of ours. Though it has its roots in the armistice that informally ended World War I in 1918, November 11th has come to mean so much more to the millions of men and women who served valiantly in World War II, both Korea and Vietnam, in recent decades in Iraq and Afghanistan, as well as countless other live action and peacekeeping missions around the world. This, of course, is to say nothing of the millions more who continue to serve and have in the past served in America's peacetime military. To me, Veterans Day is an excellent opportunity to take stock of all the rights and freedoms that we as Americans enjoy, and remember the people who have come before us to give, in some cases, everything to make sure we have those rights and freedoms. As I've reflected on Veterans Day these last couple weeks, the word that keeps coming to mind is sacrifice, and the varying degrees to which veterans have and continue to sacrifice. I think of the 5 members of Speedway High School's class of 2017 who, upon graduating from this very auditorium just 6 months ago, sacrificed a traditional and often easier post-high school path of college or career to answer the challenging call of national service. I think of my brother, Captain Timothy Shively, who, having sacrificed much over the last 11 years of service, including a 12-month tour of duty in Afghanistan, recently sacrificed celebrating his 30th birthday without his wife and son so he could fulfill the responsibility of facilitating 2 weeks of training with his men more than 2,000 miles away from home. Most of all, I think of the ultimate sacrifices of young people like Marine Sgt. John Rankel. This 2005 graduate of Speedway High School, whose father you'll meet today, was so committed to ensuring that the men under his command could return home safely that he made the ultimate sacrifice in laying down his own life. From these examples and more, it's easy to see that veterans' sacrifice can mean many different things. However, on Veterans Day, especially occurring in this month of Thanksgiving, it's imperative that we civilian citizens reflect on and show appreciation for these sacrifices. As such, I think President Abraham Lincoln said it best when he implored his audience during his Gettysburg Address in 1863 to take up the following: "It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people shall not perish from the earth." Thank you, and happy Veterans Day. United States Army.
States Navy. United States Coast Guard. United States Air Force. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Before I formally introduce our speaker this afternoon, I'd like to take a brief moment to recognize all the veterans that we may have here today who are with us and those who may be also currently serving. So at this time, if you have served our country or are currently serving, would you please stand so you can be recognized? Your service and sacrifice to this country are much appreciated. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker for this afternoon's convocation. Kevin Rankel is the father of Sergeant John K. Rankel. Today, as Mr. Rankel tells John's story, I hope that you take away at least two life lessons. The first lesson I hope that you take away is how precious your time here at Speedway High School is. 12 years ago, John walked across this same stage that the class of 2018 will walk across in May. John sat in the same classrooms you sat in, or you sit in. John participated in athletics on the same fields and in the same gym that some of you do. When John would come home on leave, he would speak to my classes. I saw a picture up there of him in front of my classroom. He and I would go have breakfast at Charlie Brown's. He sat in my living room in November 2009 before going to Afghanistan and played with my kids. And when he left, he gave my wife a big hug, and he gave me a hearty handshake and hug. Little did I know that that would be the last time I would see him alive. The second lesson I hope that you take away today is how an event like John's service and his ultimate sacrifice can bring people closer together and motivate people to be better. I can certainly say that Mr. Rankel and I are much closer than we were when John was in high school. And I can certainly say that John's mom, who's also here today, she and I are closer, even though she sat in my classroom for many days as an aide. And we have lots of mementos from John's, including his Kevlar helmet, his ammunition storage case that she gave to my sons. And lastly, I can certainly say that from all the stories of the men that served with John, that I am inspired daily by his willingness to sacrifice for a cause bigger than himself, and that inspires me daily. It is with great pride and reverence that I welcome Kevin Rankel, father of Sergeant John K. Rankel.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's kind of hard seeing those pictures scroll up. They've never scrolled up before I made these remarks, so it's a little tough to watch. First of all, thank you, Coach, for being the mentor that you were for John while he walked this earth. Coach described me as a guest this afternoon. I actually invited myself. I hadn't been back to Speedway for a while to tell this story, but it's the story of a true American hero, which is essentially, or especially appropriate on a Veterans Day like today. As Coach said, joining me today is John's mother, Tricia Stockoff, who obviously has endured a lot in this 7 years. Tricia, would you please stand up and be recognized, please? We also had a close family friend of ours show up today at the request of Coach Bennett. Gary Rakes, are you out there? Would you please stand, please? And thank you, Gary. Thanks for coming and for all your support over the years. You know, at the end of every school year, Speedway High School awards a memorial scholarship to a deserving graduating senior, recognized not only for their efforts on the athletic field, but for their service to Speedway High School and to the community as a whole. When you enter entryway number 7 to your gymnasium here, you pass by a framed football jersey that's been retired by the high school in memory of a distinguished Speedway alumni. Both the awarding of that scholarship and the retired jersey are in honor of our son, Marine Sgt. John Kenneth Rankel. So I thought it was appropriate, especially on this Veterans Day, to introduce you to John, who he was and what he did. And I hope that you'll appreciate a little more veterans like John and the ones in attendance today a little more. Now let me share some things about John. As Coach Bennett mentioned, he was a spark plug, just like you are. He attended Speedway schools through his high school graduation, except for 2.5 years when he came to live with me in the Center Grove area. John had similar likes and dislikes, just like all of you do. Likes included football, girls, music, and getting a car. Dislikes included studying, although he was a pretty good student, keeping his room clean, and listening to his parents, who were never right, at least in his mind. And I'm guessing that many of those dislikes and likes are similar to the audience that's here today. Now, I would describe John as a pretty good, not a great athlete in high school. He played football for Coach Pelly, who's also here today. Thank you, Coach. He played football for Coach Pelly during his junior and senior years. And what I was most proud of is he was a 3-sport athlete in his senior year. He played football, basketball, and baseball during his senior year. I can say that while he wasn't a great high school athlete, I can say without a doubt he was a great team player. He was the ultimate team player. And I say this because he was awarded the sportsmanship, the senior service, and the most improved awards during his senior year. Coach Bennett had this to say when he presented these awards to John. These 3 awards were voted on by the entire team. These 3 awards go to a player that demonstrated sportsmanship not only to the opposing team, but also to his own teammates. This player made the most of his opportunities when he was put into games and pushed his teammates daily with his work ethic. His commitment to our basketball program is recognized in the fact that he's not with us last year and earned his way into the program. This hard work, dedication, and self-sacrifice were recognized by his selection as the most improved player. Finally, the service award goes in part for his dedication to helping others in the community and elementary school students. Now you'll see, as I go further on to these remarks, that others noticed these traits in John later in his life. Our family has discussed between ourselves what spurred John's interest in the military, because hardly anyone in either side of the family had ever served before. I thought originally that the September 11 attacks on New York and Washington, which happened when John was a freshman, had made him decide to join. Now, John's stepfather, Don Stockoff, believes it was John's burning desire to be part of something bigger than himself, to join the ultimate team, which makes a lot of sense. Whatever the influence, I remember finding him surfing the Marine Corps website a year or so after 9/11 and telling him that with his skill set, he should go to college and join the military afterward as an officer. And he didn't feel the same. If he were going to join, he wanted to join as an enlisted man and be as close to the front line as possible. Now, those discussions continued through the end of his sophomore year when he decided to return to Speedway and live with his mother. Now, I was devastated by that. And it took me a long time, frankly, to forgive him, but I did. And once I did, I started focusing my efforts on trying to land him his football scholarship, because Ball State and Franklin College at that time had expressed an interest in him. But what I didn't realize at the time was that he was still continuing to pursue his interest in the Marine Corps, and he told me over breakfast in September of his senior year. Now, he agreed to hold off signing the commitment papers until he visited a few more schools that fall. but his heart wasn't in it. Despite his visits, his mind was made up, and he was going to join the Marine Corps. He did sign those commitment papers on December 27th, 2004, and agreed to join the Marines after graduation. So John's career with the Marine Corps formally began on August 5th, 2005, just a few days after his 19th birthday. I can remember our families going out to Fort Bend, and I still didn't think this was the right decision for him, I'll be honest with you. But they jumped on a bus to go wherever they were going. John was going to Camp Pendleton. Some other kids that were on the same bus were going someplace else but to join the military. I remember those kids specifically with their shoulders just, they weren't ready to go. John Rankel jumped on the bus. He was ready to go, and he convinced me, okay, this is his thing. He's ready to do it. And I wasn't wrong, because he was a fish in water, because according to his fellow Marines, he was a natural. He was a Marine's Marine from the onset. He graduated from basic training with honors. Then he went into the School of Infantry, where he again graduated with honors. He was promoted to corporal earlier than his peers, and he prepared for his first deployment to Iraq in 2007. Thankfully, his first tour in Iraq, as well as his second, were pretty uneventful. Since his death, we've met with several Marines he deployed with to Iraq, and I can't tell you how many times I've heard what a great Marine he was, how he wanted to get better at what he did, and how he motivated others to do the same, which was exactly what Coach Bennett had seen several years ago. And oh yes, his fellow Marines also commented about the infectious and sometimes goofy smile that you see on some of these slides. Toward the end of his second Iraq deployment, John was a little bit disillusioned with the Marine Corps, and he'd expressed an interest to us in leaving the Marine Corps and going to college. So I jumped right in and got him applications to several schools, including IU, Franklin College, and IUPUI. And he proceeded to fill all those out and was in the process of being accepted. A week after he returned to the United States from his second deployment in Iraq, however, he called me and told me he decided to stay in the Marine Corps. My response was, wait a minute, John. You've done your part. You've gone to Iraq twice. You've deployed twice. Why do you need to go a third time? His response was, Pops, it's the right thing to do. I didn't have an answer for that. Now, just to give you an idea of how badly he wanted to get to Afghanistan and join the fight, his original unit's mission changed shortly after John re-enlisted and was promoted to sergeant. Now, instead of deploying to Afghanistan, he was going to tour the Orient on a Navy ship. John was having none of that. He actively sought to join another unit that was going to Afghanistan, and his transfer was accepted in late 2009. Now, he still had to win the respect of that unit that he was being transferred to, because they'd already started their building and their training for when they were going to Afghanistan. I mean, why would somebody readily accept a green, recently promoted sergeant? But he set out to win their respect, and he did so through hard work and determination. And he won several fitness commendations from his commanding officers before he left for Iraq, or for Afghanistan. Now, I've gone on for a few minutes about how great a Marine I think he was, but I can give you no greater example than the day he died, June 7th, 2010. John was out on patrol, leading 2 squads of 6 men each, when the squad he wasn't a part of came under heavy attack. The 6 men that came under heavy attack were pinned down and had only a haystack for cover. We're told John ran approximately 600 yards with 80 pounds of gear on his back to get to that other squad and help start returning fire to suppress the enemy. Recognizing he needed artillery support to defeat the enemy in this instance, he radioed for that support, but was told that he and his Marines were too close to the target and would have to fall back. This is where it gets hard for me, because my son, our son, acted in such a way I can't begin to fathom. He ordered each of his 6 Marines to fall back while he stayed behind in that haystack by himself and provided covering fire. When they'd all fallen back safely, he himself got up to fall back and was shot. The firefight that had existed that whole time continued and prevented his fellow Marines from evacuating him to safety immediately. We're told that he fought for his life for nearly an hour before he succumbed to his wounds. I wanted to speak to the young people here today. You know, this wasn't airsoft. This wasn't Call of Duty or even paintball. This was the real thing. And I ask each of you in this auditorium this afternoon, could you have done what John did? My personal answer is no, I couldn't. I would have fallen back and gotten out of there before my 6 buddies, or even worse, I'd have probably been frozen in fear behind that haystack and couldn't move. But our son, our hero, did not. This 23-year-old man who grew up in this community just like you made the ultimate sacrifice 7 years ago this past summer. And for his actions that day, he was awarded the Purple Heart and the Bronze Star with a Valor device to recognize his heroism. John is buried in the Field of Valor at Crown Hill Cemetery here in Indianapolis. And I'd encourage everyone to visit Crown Hill, not just to see John, but just to take in the history out there. I'd also encourage everyone to visit the Indiana War Memorial down in downtown Indianapolis. What a treasure that place is. John's mother was instrumental in getting the War Memorial to set up an exhibit that tells John's story. And one of the pictures in our slideshow here is of then Governor Mitch Daniels reviewing that exhibit when he was in office just a few years ago. Lastly, I want to tell you another story about what John's fellow Marines did to honor him while they were still deployed in Afghanistan. Toward the end of this slideshow is a picture of several military trucks parked inside a compound. The size of this compound is tough to visualize, but we're told it's triangle-shaped, which each side of the triangle being approximately 230 yards long. That's over 2 football fields on each side. This compound was named Command Outpost Rankel. Now, Cop Rankel has since been turned over to the Afghans, but we're told that it's still the biggest command outpost in Afghanistan. His commanding officer wrote the following about the outpost. Its purpose and personality match the man it was named for. Its size is bigger than all other outposts, and indeed far bigger than what was needed for the company. But John Rankel was a big man. Its location is pushed right up against the bazaar, which was once a powerful enemy stronghold, because John Rankel feared no one. John Rankel ran to the fight and didn't back down. So while I miss our son every single day, I am so very proud of what people thought of him while he was on this earth and the action he took when he was called upon. Through all this, I've gained a new appreciation for veterans. And I'd ask everyone in attendance today to reflect a little harder this Veterans Day on what the veterans before us, as well as those who didn't come home, have done for us. Thank a veteran for their service and their sacrifice. They are, in most cases, ordinary citizens called upon to do extraordinary things. Thank you for your time this afternoon. God bless John Rankel, the veterans before us today, and God bless America. Thank you.
Thank you again, Mr. Rankel, for coming and sharing with us today and for your son's service and ultimate sacrifice. While we can never repay those who have served and sacrificed for our country, we can show them honor and offer our appreciation through our daily actions. To all those here with us today who have served, along with those that are watching from home, we thank you. That does conclude our program for today. I want to thank everybody for coming. At this time, students, you are dismissed to go home. Have a great weekend. Have a great day.